I'm super excited to be here in conversation with Raghav for the second time in 48 hours. Um, and I think we should jump right into it by having you read an excerpt from your novel, and then we can talk about it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anushka. Thanks for doing this again. Hi, everyone. I'm Raghav, and thank you all for coming and making this event so special, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to read briefly, and I promise I'll keep it brief. But because Bangalore is quite a educated crowd always, I want to make one important clarification. In this excerpt that I'm reading, I say yellow like a bulbul, and many bird watchers and ornithologists, they say bulbul is red, white, and black. Where's the yellow? I want to reassure you that this is factually correct. There is a yellow-throated bulbul that is endemic to South India, so it's not a factual inaccuracy. I've checked it up. But thank you for that little small clarification. I'll read now. I'll keep it short. This is from the... so Savi has grown up in southern India. She's grown up in a convent. Then she's worked on a estate in Tamil Nadu, and after this, she goes to America and under false documentation, and she takes on a new identity. This section this is from that section. I hope you like it. Yellow like the throat of the bulbul, the words ran along the steely gray Lexus. Dancing Shiva driving school. Dialing the 1-800 number produced the following message. No car? Need a lesson? No problem. Missy will take care of you. Just leave contact info, I'll revert. Have an amazing day. It was late afternoon and her to-do list stretched ahead like freshly painted road. Emissions tests were pending, new air filters awaited installation. The boiler needed to be looked at, it was singing again. Homeowner, business owner, attacked the day like a long curve. A single red and white bangle, resized and refitted, clinked against her watch face as she adjusted the rear view. A likeness of her, made from crepe paper and silver foil, rotated in the fading light. It had a little green cloth patch that matched how she wore her hair, a green dupatta wrapped around her bun. It had black shoulder pads to represent her signature leather jacket. The girls had made it one Mother's Day in the style that Ananda used to make dolls and animals for them. It twirled. Decades disappeared like sunbeams. Since the frigid November morning they arrived in America, marveling at the space, the absence of people, and the profusion of cars, at the green strips between highway large enough for whole villages. The cold air bit with promise. You can bury past privations and humiliations. Let the desert bury the desert. Let the jungle reside in the jungle. With a new name, Royce, little luggage and fewer dollars, they sought the Catholic mission. The nuns had taken her in once before. Under the stone palm of the Virgin, she haggled with the taxi driver. "Look here, Missy," he said. "That's not how it goes in America." Ananda shrugged as if to say, God knows how these people live. Still, the driver took half the fare, teaching her that a lot of what was said about America was not true. Missy, he'd called her. There was respect in it. It was multifunctional, a name and a title. She was determined to use everything that came her way. When intake asked her name, she answered, Missy.
So within the book, this chapter marks a clear and very significant turning point for Missy. We see her new and transformed, and she takes ownership of this new name that's almost assigned to her by this taxi driver. So I wondered if you could talk about the significance of her choosing this name.
Absolutely, and I do think it's very significant because when you write a book with a principal main character who's going to be the title character, you don't want them to be passive where things are just happening to them. You want them to be making decisions and charting their own course through the book. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, of course, people say it's an immigrant story, America, India, but I think anyone who's experienced leaving one school and going to another school, you may use a different name, or you may drop an old nickname. Like when you have a life transition, you drop old parts of your identity and pick up new ones. And that could be moving from a small town to a metro and saying, I'm going to self-determine. I'm going to engage in self-determination and choose who I want to be. And I think for me and many people I know, there's just a struggle between, like, what do I want to bring from my traditions, my family, my background, and also who do I want to be in the future? And so I think this is a mark where she decides, I'm going to decide my own destiny.
That's interesting because, I've heard you say that it's not an immigrant novel, and I think the changing of geographic locations is more about representing the fluidity of identity.
But of course, I understand if people see it that way because it is that also. So I shouldn't, it's true. It is about immigration, but it's not primarily. I think it's about self-determination more than anything.
And in a letter at the end of the book, you say that you wanted to write Missy because, and I'm quoting, often the former lives of parents are inaccessible to their children. So what were you trying to imagine or access in writing Missy?
Yeah, so I don't want to take a ton of time, but the journey of this book was not straightforward. I wrote a multi-generational story about a family that begins in India, goes to Qatar, then goes to America, and it had many characters, and I used it to get my agent, but she said, this is nice and all, but it's not going to sell. At least not for a debut novelist, because it's too long, it's too complicated. You have this compelling character. Can you write a story about her? So I did that, but when you write a novel on spec, on demand for someone else, somewhere along the line I lost the original impulse. Why am I doing this? Am I doing this for someone else? And I was in that point where I had lost the original impulse. I didn't know what I was doing, and I felt it was mediocre and not good. And I was just questioning everything, really. Had I made the wrong decision committing to writing? I had always felt a conflict that I should be doing something practical, making money. This might have been a poor life decision. And at that time, I called my dad, and normally I would just ask for life advice. But for some reason, I asked him, when you were 31, what was going on in your life? And his answer really was, he had to think back, he had to project himself into the past, and he was like, oh, actually, that was a very difficult time in my life. I had taken a big pay cut to become a PhD student in Chicago. My wife was very upset with me because we had come to a cold place where we knew very few people, had very little family, and I had a 1-year-old baby. I had a mortgage that we were not making the mortgage, and suddenly I could picture him. I could picture him at my age, at a different stage of life, shoveling snow off a car, wondering, what am I doing here? And I understood how I should rewrite this book to be about using the imagination to access moments in someone else's life, maybe a daughter for a mother, that you can't see it until you imagine it. None of us can go back and see our parents at important junctures in their life, except through the imagination. So that helped me revise the book and then produce something that now I'm very proud of.
Yeah, that's a really lovely story. Thank you. Yeah, I think, and we've talked about how, echoes from our parents' lives can appear in our lives, which comes through in the book also with the characters themselves. So in this letter, so there's a letter at the end of the book that Raghav addresses to the reader, which I love, so I'm going to bring it up again. In that letter, you also talk about your approach to art and reading and writing. So how has that approach evolved as you wrote this book?
So, when you set out to write a book, you think, I'll write a book, it'll be good, someone will publish it, and it's so humbling how not straightforward it is. Publishing, not in India, but generally globally, the margins are dwindling, the commercial imperative is very difficult. It's hard to get a book out into the world, get an agent, and move through all the steps. So along the way, I think I I stopped over focusing on, oh, I need a book to be a valuable human being. Until I write a book, I won't matter. And I had to let go of that and just focus on the craft and just showing up to my desk every day or as close to every day as I could and putting in the hours and being satisfied with that. If I showed up, then that's enough. My self-worth is not tied to external product. And that is definitely what I have learned from the journey. I do love, my publisher asked me to include this letter to the reader, and it was a joy to write it, because I think that people think the writer writes something, the reader consumes it. But actually, every reader has a different neural constellation. They come with their own life experiences. They project their own family members, friends, people who remind them of characters. They imagine things with their own texture. So every reader is a co-author with every writer. And I got to say that in this letter and acknowledge all the readers. So thank you all for being readers, because, yeah, that's what we need.
So speaking of life experiences, you went to Rishi Valley boarding school, and I think some of your friends are out here to support you. How was that experience formative in your writing journey?
It was hard to overstate it. I went to Rishi Valley from 6th standard to 12th standard, so 7 years in boarding school, and it was really the totality of my life was this school. You know, I went home for the holidays, but that wasn't my home, because all the people there who are living there all the years, like they know the places to hang out, etc. You're always a guest visiting your own city. Whereas in boarding school, that's my school. So I went there, and also they didn't have technology. I remember I was very upset we weren't allowed MP3 players. But in the end, this was a good thing, because I spent a lot of time in the library. I read a ton of books. And it was also, it's tough in cities, as you all know, to access green space and outdoor space. And I really had a chance in this beautiful school to imbibe nature. And I think, especially in the first 10 chapters, a lot of it is pulled from Rishi Valley. And it's 3 hours. It's located in Horsley Hills, in that area. If any of you, it's not far away, please go to Horsley. Please stop by Rishi Valley. It'll be a nice weekend or a day. And I should also say, sorry, I can't believe I didn't say it. My teachers, I mean, to be taught by people who love literature is special. And, you know, J. Krishnamurti founded Rishi Valley with an emphasis on education, and it's attracted many wonderful minds who could have very prominent careers in any field, but have chosen teaching, and their love of the material comes through. And, you know, a true teacher enriches generations, and I've been lucky to have many wonderful teachers. And now that I teach creative writing, I channel them, and I'm grateful to be part of that lineage.
There's a character in the book named Varun, and some of his experiences, you've said, are quite close to your own experiences. And I also felt that he embodied this kind of emotional code switching, where he's a different person in different places, and it's almost like there's a stark contrast, which comes across as very genuine, which is surprising. So I wondered if you could speak more about that character and his identity.
Thanks for asking that. Yeah, Varun is biographically the closest to me, even though I think it's exaggerated for dramatic purposes. Like, I don't think that, Varun is me, but he's in his 30s, he's left India, and he lives in America, and so there are some similarities. But he's a doctor, so he's much more high achieving. But no, just all jokes aside, Varun is different in different situations. So he is, when he's with his American friends, he's one sort of way. When he's with his Indian American friends, he might be one sort of way. When he's in a professional context, he's a different person. And then back home in India, I've noticed, and this is true, he's like more sharp and rude with his parents. I'm guilty of that too, definitely. But yeah, I think readers are very discerning. They can detect a false note, and they can set down a book if they detect a false note. And we need to respect readers and try to strike the emotional truth. And when I can, I'm glad. And of course, there's going to be a few false notes, but you hope that they're overlooked over the course of the reading experience.
That's, I mean, one of the strange paradoxes of fiction is that in life we don't have cohesive identities, but sometimes in a book you're expected to create much more cohesion. And I think your characters do a good job of striking that balance where we believe that they're very real.
Thank you.
So the writing is also, as you heard from the excerpt, it's very visual, very cinematic, and you've said that we are created by the screen. Yeah, how has that been an influence for you?
Yeah, I believe that we are, what we spend time doing and what we spend time consuming shapes us or creates us. And like many, I assume, I've watched a lot of TV and watched a lot of movies, and sometimes that can enter into my work, sometimes to its detriment, where many times in my first drafts, I feel like I'm watching the characters rather than inhabiting them psychologically. So then that's why you have drafting and iterative review to make sure that, okay, fine, maybe I'm seeing this like a movie because I need to understand the story for myself, but in the next draft and the next draft after that, I will go deeper and inhabit each character and see the world through them. And but I'm conscious of how much movies have influenced me. My agent says many of the manuscripts she receives, she can tell that this is it's written by someone who's seeing it unfold. And sometimes that works, but many times it's a sign there needs to be more drafting.
Yeah, I'm sure inhabiting these characters and this world was quite a process, and the book addresses some fairly heavy themes. And you've told me that your wife is also a trauma therapist. So how has her work impacted your writing?
Yeah, absolutely. My wife is a trauma therapist in Chicago, as Anushka mentioned, and she's done a number of fellowships. And it's influenced me hugely because when you write a book with a murder or a death, and this happens all the time, I think, where like it's just used as a plot point and people move on from it very quickly, and the unfolding grief or trauma or the actual reverberations of such extreme violence in people's lives is not fully reckoned with. You just move on to the next plot point. And because of my wife, I wanted to not do that, to really handle the material thoughtfully and give it its full weight. And I think it makes for a better book for that reason. And so I'm massively grateful to her. She's also just a very sharp reader and editor. And she doesn't like to read, she doesn't like it if I give her all the chapters, but when I'm really stuck, she helps me push through. And yeah, so but yeah, I mean, trauma and therapy, they're not dissimilar from writing in many ways. It's about like iterative, constantly returning to the same things until they're processed. So we have a lot of dinner table conversation around this.
Oh, that's lovely. And I just want to say that it's lovely to hear someone give their spouse the credit that is deserved.
Yeah, she gets a lot of credit.
That's great. So what is some of the advice that you give to your students?
I think just I try and tell them writing is information in sequence. And what that means is get the information out and then worry about sequencing it. So embrace mess making, write whatever nonsense comes to your head, generate lots of volume, and later have a coffee, come back to your work, see what's there, and remove what's rubbish and keep what's good. But don't have a qualitative judgment switched on while you're writing your first draft. Suspend judgment, suspend qualitative judgment, generate volume, later bring in qualitative judgment. This process works for me, so I speak about it. Other people must have other approaches, but I think it makes sense to share what works for me. Try it at home. If it works for you, I'm glad.
Okay, that's lovely. And you've also told me how your students have impacted your process.
Yeah, I think I love teaching. I don't find it onerous. I don't find that it cuts into my writing time at all. Actually, it forces me to be disciplined, because if I go to the classroom and I tell them something, and then I come home and I don't do that thing, I feel very guilty. So having them gives me integrity and honesty. And so even small thing, if I say, oh, you're sleepy in class because you must have been on your phone late at night, then at night when I'm on my phone, I'm like, oh, I should probably put my phone in the other room. So even in small things, it just makes me conscious and take better care of myself and practice self-care. Because if I'm going to tell them to that, I also need to be doing it at home. So yeah, but definitely, just like authors are co-creators, students can co-create a classroom, and you learn a lot from them. My mother is a teacher, and I've seen how she operates a classroom, and it's always energized. She learns a lot from her students. Her students are friends with her 15, 20, 30 years later, so that's what I would like for myself too.
Oh, that's lovely. So squash is another important part of your life. How has the mindset and discipline that squash involves kind of, been part of your life and your writing?
Yeah, I didn't play squash when I was growing up. Growing up, I played football and cricket, mostly football. And then I started playing squash 6 or 7 years ago, and I became obsessed. And I play 3 or 4 times a week. And I think it was all about this idea of show up every day and invest in mastery of the craft, and good things arise as sort of a positive externality from showing up to do the same thing every day. Sort of a deep belief in practice that is very tangible in sport, where you can see yourself getting better. Or learning a language is another good corollary practice, where you see yourself getting better. So even in writing, you may not feel that you're getting better, but you have to think, if I'm putting in the hours, I must be getting better. So having these corollary practices has really helped me not lose faith in the writing process, understand that every hour invested, it will pay off, even if it feels like I'm going backwards, even if it feels like I'm deleting old material or I'm just spinning my tires in the mud, there will be something that emerges from this.
Okay. Yeah, I think what you've said to me and right now about squash.
One more thing, sorry, I want to add this also. There's I found that artists and sports are seen as two totally different disciplines. When I went for my MFA at the School of the Art Institute, I asked them about athletic facilities. Not only did they say we don't have any, they said no one has ever asked us this question before. And in the end, they came back to me, we can give you a 20% discount on a local gym. Will that work? But I think Haruki Murakami, the Japanese author, has a long-distance running practice. Like, conditioning the mind and the body support each other. They're mutually reinforcing. And artists shouldn't be glib or dispense with sport as anti-intellectual or something like that. It can really help hone discipline and take care of one's mental health and all the things. So I'm a big believer in it, and I hope people should develop sports practices and exercise practices who want to be artists. It feeds into it. Maybe start with that. Do 10 push-ups, and then you can write a novel.
Yeah. So we actually have only 5 minutes left, so I'll open it up to the audience because I'm sure there are questions. Okay, we have 2 minutes, so. One question.
It says 5 here.
Yeah, this clock is wrong.
Hi everyone, my name is Nguyễn Phan Quế Mai, an author from Vietnam. As you could hear from this panel, Raghav is such a talented author, compassionate human being, so kind. This is his debut book, so I would appreciate it very much if you buy his book, get it signed today, leave a review on Goodreads, because debut authors really need our support.
Thank you, Quema.
And he has done so much for the community, for authors like me, for his students. So please do this for all of us. Thank you. So one question. Your main character is a woman. So was it hard for you to write in the viewpoint of a woman? Would it have been easier to write in the viewpoint of a man? And what did you learn from the process? Thank you.
Thank you so much for this question. I'm very proud of how this turned out, because I did feel I started it. I don't know why I started it. I was following the impulse. I started it. Now you're halfway through a book, questioning yourself. Do I have the right to do this? Will people question its authenticity? Is it hitting a false note? And at that time, I shared my draft with a few of my professors, all of whom were women, and they said, don't lose faith. You're doing good work here. Don't let anyone tell you you can't write this character. You're doing good work. Don't give up. So while I was experiencing imposter syndrome, they told me, don't worry. You can do this. So I'm very grateful to them. The fact is, 80% of the fiction reading market is women. 95% of the editors and agents that I've met, more or less, are women. And all the people who have helped my career, including my wife, have been women. They're really supported me. And Missy's character, as I'm writing it and revising it, my agent, Priya Doraswamy, she runs her own business. She's a mother, and she's tough as nails, and she's got her own business in America. Keshni Naidu, my UK editor, similarly, mother to kids, full-time job, high-powered editor. And I realized that I was writing my editor and agent into this character because you're influenced by the people you spend time with. So I'm really glad that my characters have imbibed some of these qualities. I'm very grateful to these people because I wouldn't have a debut novel if it wasn't for them. And these are some realities, like fiction is kept alive by women. So thank you.